Hey everyone, welcome to Align Your Design. I'm Chris Prochaska, and this is a little quick masterclass on mastering the mind and uncovering the roots of anxiety and transforming it into wisdom. Now, I just want to give you a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the awareness centers in the design, and I'm going to be talking about it at kind of the high level. And whether or not you have these centers defined in your design or not is irrelevant. One of the things be aware of is that we have all of it. We have all the centers, we have all the gates, we have all the channels as possibilities in our design. And when you look at your own chart, you'll see that there's certain gates, channels, or centers that you have defined, that are defined consistently in your design, and that means that the energy is flowing there consistently. So again, just I'm not going to dive into if you have it defined, if you don't have it defined. That is such a huge conversation, and way too hard. There's way too many different factors to go into to uncover all of that. But what I do hope to do is help you to see the mechanics of how these awareness centers, and the fears and anxieties that are built into them, can actually lead to greater intelligence and greater wisdom, and hopefully a little less anxiety. All right, so one of the things to be aware of, no pun intended, is that we have three awareness centers. These awareness centers allow us to be conscious of our experience of life, and all of them have fears baked into the design. In other words, they are implicit in the design, they are part of the design. And so a lot of times people will come to me, oh, I've been working on this fear, this belief, or whatever, and I can't seem to clear it. Well, that's for a really good reason. You're not going to get rid of it, you're not going to clear it. It is part and parcel of your design and all of our designs as humans. And so, what we can do, though, instead of getting rid of them, is learn to work with them and learn to work and see how they are um, communicating with the other aspects of our design. And again, each one of us as an individual is going to have a little different way of doing that. So the three awareness centers that we have are the spleen center, and this is all about survival fears. The ajna, our mental anxieties, and the solar plexus, our emotional insecurities or nervousness. So let's talk a little bit about each of those. So we've got here the spleen. Again, this is our body consciousness. It is in the moment. It's an in the moment awareness. It is body survival awareness. It's existential awareness. Am I alive? Am I not alive? Right? And it is, related to the immune system, which is again all about survival. The ajna is a mental or mind consciousness and mind intelligence, and it dominates the way that we see the world and perceive the world. It's related to the neocortex, the visual cortex, and the pituitary and endocrine systems. When we come to the solar plexus, oh, and the ajna operates over all time, right? So this is in the moment. The spleen is in the moment. This is operating over all time. It can look to the past, it can look to the future. It can be aware of something in the moment, but it tends to vacillate between the past and the future. Past experiences and relating everything to past experiences and or projecting into the future. And then the solar plexus here is, our emotional intelligence, it's our emerging spiritual awareness, it's our spirit consciousness. And it is related to the lungs, kidneys, pancreas, prostate, and the nervous system. Now, when we talk about the nervous system, we talk about trauma. We can talk about it in terms of capital T traumas that happen, like those big events or experiences that could happen once or maybe over time. And it can also be those developmental traumas, those developmental um, experiences. Conditioning is one of them, but our how we're relating to others and how we are, present to our feelings or not present to them, how we are responding and connecting to something greater to ourselves, greater than ourselves, spirit, or each other, right? Emotions are what make us human and humane. And again, it is also our connection to spirit. And this operates in an oscillating, biochemical oscillating wave over time. So it's over time that you get that emotional clarity. It's not in the moment, although you may experience an emotion in the moment, one also recognizes that that feeling can pass as well. And so it's oftentimes looking back at what you've experienced in the past and or what are you experiencing now, but the truth is revealed over time. Now, the thing about let's again talk a little bit more about these centers. So we have again the spleen center, and what what makes this one, the spleen center and the emotion center, different than the ajna or the mental center is that they are connected to motors. So the spleen center can be connected up to the heart center, which is a motor, the sacral center, and or the root center, all three of which are motors. The soul, and so you can act, you can take action. You have, something comes into your field and you're like, oh shit, this is danger. And you can move, you can get away, you can do something different. In the emotion center, the solar plexus is a motor center in and of itself, as well as being an awareness center. And it too is connected to the other three motor centers, the heart center, sacral, and also the root center. And again, we can take action, we can do something with that motor in the solar plexus and, act on our emotions, which a lot of people do for better or worse. We can see this. Now, the ajna is not connected to a motor center. In other words, it's it is not, it's here to observe. It is not here to act. We're not here to act from our mental awareness. And yet, most of us do. And in a lot of ways, we do because we're kind of taught that way. Think about it, make a logical decision. Didn't you think about it? Didn't you take all the into consideration, all the pros and cons and et cetera, et cetera? And we tend to default to our mind to make our decisions for us. And yet, eat all of us are actually designed to, in many ways, listen to our body. Now, mental projectors and reflectors, it's a little bit different, and I'm not going to go into all the different type strategies and authorities here, but just again talking at a high level of the nature of the ajna, the nature of the mind. All right, the mind is dualistic. It's a this and a that. It has no authority in life. Even as a mental projector, it doesn't have an authority there. And again, there's a whole way of working with the mental projector and their authority to get clarity over time. The mind or ajna can see all the options, right? It can see the big picture, but it can't tell what is correct for us. It does not know, right? It's about, this is where rationalization, comparison, etc., can come in and really create what I call a little mental circle jerk. It becomes a never-ending spiral, and it may feel good to feel certain in a moment, but certainty is an illusion. And when we look at the shadow of the ajna center, is all about this wanting to be right, wanting to be certain. And again, so many of us were seeking certainty. What we really need is clarity. And my hope is that this little masterclass here is going to help you get some more clarity versus certainty. Because again, certainty is an illusion. And the mind will want you to believe that it can be certain about certain things. And again, it can't. Okay. So let's also talk a little bit about how loud each of these centers are. So I have a little analogy I like to use around, using the example of the how loud something is, the decibels, right? So the spleen, let's just imagine using this example that the spleen is operates at about 30 decibels. It's pretty quiet. It operates just boom, right in the moment. It is a moment to moment awareness in the now. Okay. And it's quiet. So 30 decibels. The ajna is twice as loud as the spleen. So if the spleen is at 30 decibels, the ajna comes in at 60 decibels. And again, this is just an analogy. This isn't like the truth of it. It's just a way to think about it. So it's louder, right? So the spleen has this instant awareness, and then the mind comes in and it's like trying to make up a story about that or figure it out, and it's loud. Think about how many times you just listen to your thoughts all day long. They're loud. And how we can get very attuned to listening to our mind and all the thoughts that are happening there versus really listening to the more subtle awareness that's happening here in the spleen. Now, the solar plexus is twice as loud as the ajna. So if we start out at 30 decibels in the spleen, go to 60 in the ajna, we're at 120 decibels in the emotion center. That's loud. We are now, you can really start. I mean, imagine when you feel something, it's loud, right? You're like, oh my God, I'm feeling whatever I'm feeling. And this can also maybe even override what the awareness is that's happening in our spleen, whether something really is safe for us or not. Okay, so let's look a little bit deeper at these awareness centers. As I mentioned before, we've got fears that are baked into each of them. And one of the things that I put a little color coding here, again, just it helps me to think about things in a way of, visually and also with color. I'm an artist, so I think about things this way. So the spleen center is logical. There's no emotion over here. Now, fears can feel emotional, but over here, this is survival fears. These are primal fears. They are um, again more logical, related, relative to the solar plexus. So I made this one blue because it's kind of cold. It doesn't care about how anybody else is feeling about something. It's just like, this is safe for me or it isn't. So it's logical, it's survival, and it is also in many ways responding to particles, right? So we have particles on this side that the spleen is aware of, and waves over here on the solar plexus side. I'll get to that in a moment. So here's an analogy, right? This is the immune system. You have a virus or a bacteria that enters into your bloodstream, and the immune system responds to the particles of that, and it shuts it down. It attacks it. Tries to get rid of those. The T cells get activated, and it responds to the particles. It responds to um, things in the environment, right? Particles in the environment. And by the way, particles can be thought forms. Particles can be, as I said before, viruses. It can be, triggers or stimulus in the environment that it is responding to. Using that age-old example of the saber-toothed tiger, right? It's a thing that it's responding to, a particle, okay? And again, I'm just using these sort of as an analogy to get your mind and your awareness seeing the difference of how these all work. Okay, so it's cold, it's logical, it's responding to particles in the body and or in the environment. The solar plexus, I made this orange because it's more warm, right? We think of our emotions, they're what connect us, they're what drive our biology. It's what, has us be attracted to someone or not. And, I tend to think of that as more that warm side of the body. And these are, we have these emotional waves that we are experiencing. And the nature of the wave is that it moves, it's in motion, and it's constantly in motion. So we can have this nervousness based on this emotional, how do I feel about this? How does this other person feel about me? It's picking up on and experiencing the world through this wave-like motion. The ajna, I made this one green because in a lot of ways, its thought forms or its observations grow out of what it's taking in from the spleen on the logic side, the particles that it's responding to, and the the emotion side, the waves in the solar plexus. And it starts to grow all of these thoughts and these ideas and trying to make sense of it. And we'll look at how that works here in just a moment. So, the other thing about this is that when we look at the the spleen and the solar plexus, we have two source gates. And these two source gates are the 50 over here in the spleen center. And this is the source of our survival intelligence. And gate 6 in the solar plexus, which is the source of our emotional intelligence. And something that is, I think, just fascinating when we look at it in terms of human design is that fear is our source of intelligence. Intelligence comes through fear. So again, when if you're trying to get rid of fears, you're trying to remove them or go against them or override them or whatever, you can actually, on one level, inhibit your intelligence, but on another level, you can actually develop intelligence and wisdom through really understanding the mechanics of these fears and where they come from, and how how all three of these awareness centers work together. All right, so again, here we have this little chart where we have our spleen, we have our source of intelligence on the survival side, gate 50. And we also have the source of our emotional intelligence in gate 6 in the solar plexus over here on the other side. All right, so how do these operate? How does the mechanics of this work? So I see it again coming back to the ajna is here ideally to observe what is coming in through the body, through the spleen, and through the solar plexus. So the spleen has an awareness. It meets a particle, it meets something in the field, and a fear is elicited for survival. And that information goes up to the ajna, and this is happening instantaneously, by the way. But that the ajna is watching that, it's listening to that. And on the other hand, on the emotion side, you're feeling an emotion. If you have your emotion center undefined, maybe you're picking up on the emotional wave of someone else, or if you have it defined, you are experiencing those emotions. And whether or not you're consciously aware of those feelings or not, that is being transmitted up to the ajna. It is being, kind of transmitted. And the ajna then is taking in that information and it's watching, right? its highest expression of as an awareness center ideally is an observer, right? But it keeps getting involved in this process of what's going on in the body. And what can happen here is it tends to override the information that's happening on the splenic side and or on the emotion side. And kind of what happens is that it starts to make up these thoughts like, oh, I know what those fears mean, and it's relating to past experiences or potential future things that could happen, right? Instead, and trying to get us to act on that. Or on the solar plexus side, I know why those feelings are there. So, and that may or may not be really what is happening, right? Because these these awareness centers down here in the emotions, it's like, let's say you've had a past experience of having a situation where um you had a certain feeling with somebody, and a traumatic experience with somebody, and your body, every time you get in that kind of situation, your body gets triggered in a certain way. And that information, whether or not it's actually happening in that moment is irrelevant. It's there, you're aware of it, right? And then that information goes up, the mind says, oh, I know why those feelings are there. This person, this situation, it's happening all over again. And they're making me feel this certain way, or this is exactly how it's going to go, it always goes this way. Do you see it like starts to make up a story instead of really allowing the solar plexus. And again, remember, the awareness, the clarity in the solar plexus comes over time. It's like, okay, I'm having this, I'm feeling these feelings, I'm experiencing this emotion. And and a right use of the mind would be, okay, let's really look at this right now. Am I really in danger? Is what I'm interpreting here really happening? Right? Is this person really have malintent towards me, or is it just reminding me of when I felt this way in the past? And what can happen is that it can create this loop. So this information comes up here, the mind starts to go, oh, I know why those feelings are. It sends it back to the solar plexus, which can create this loop of replaying an emotional response, or even coming up with fears. Oh, this is how it's going to go, and I'm actually in danger, really, really in danger. If we think about, when I think about working with people who have like a fear of visibility, sometimes that comes from this very primal fear. It might be a past life fear. It might be seeing someone else being out on, social media and being attacked for sharing their message or something like that. And this real, and then having people attack them. And and so it brings up these fears of survival. And so that comes up, it goes up to the ajna. Oh my god, I better not say anything because I don't want to be attacked too. That comes back down into the spleen, and then you've got this loop that's happening here. Okay, so again, the mind in its right use is just watching, and it's not making up those stories. It's helping you to clarify what's going on there. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the emotional wave, and just giving you another little perspective here on this. So, when we're looking at the wave and you're experiencing the wave, we've got peaks and valleys, right? You've got this like, oh, it feels really good, and oh, this doesn't feel so good, right? And oh, I want this experience to last forever. Oh, this feels so good. I want to keep feeling this way. Or you're down in the valley and you're like, this sucks. I just want out of this. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't like this feeling. Maybe I feel like it's never going to end, that type of thing, right? And if we look at it like this, what can happen is that we can get into judgment. And I think that the mind is in a way contributing to this. The mind is like, oh my God, this feels so good. I want to keep doing it. So I'll make some decisions to keep making these, the peak stay here. Addiction, addictive behaviors can do that. Or we're down in the valley and it's like, oh my God, I want to, how can I get out of this as fast as possible? Or, blaming other people or or situations for what we're feeling instead of really feeling them. And I was drawing this the other day and then I flipped it over and I was like, wait a minute, you know, one person might look at it like this, oh God, this is the peak. Whereas another person might be experiencing that same peak as a valley and vice versa. So depending on how you look at the wave, it changes, right? We know this from quantum physics, right? If you look at something, it's like, is it a particle? Is it a wave? But even the wave can change. And the thing that I really got about this is that when we enter into the wave fully, especially those of you who have to wait for emotional clarity, um, and really start to synthesize, there's so much wisdom that's available when you begin to synthesize these peaks and valleys and recognize that they are actually one and the same, depending on how you look at it. And this is not a spiritual override or an intellectual revisioning. It's a full surrender to experiencing the valleys as peaks and vice versa through surrender, through going into them fully and embodying and embracing them, which allows for the peak to be revealed. So with the peaks, that again, there can be a fear that they'll disappear or go away. And so, if one is trying to capture or hold on to this feeling, right? And again, the mind can get in there and say, oh, this is what worked for us in the past. Let's keep doing it, right? Or the valleys come just as the peaks come. And both are available to us. Both of them have wisdom for us, whether you have your emotion center defined or not. It's often our avoidance of the valley and holding on to the peak that are the issue, not the peaks and valleys themselves. As we can see in that image, they're one and the same, indivisible. What sets them apart is how we perceive and whether or not we're judging or categorizing one as better than the other versus simply being with them. And I love this saying. I don't know who said it, but it's like, when you're in a descent, dive. When you're in the valley, dive deeper into it, because that's where you'll find the peak. And I've had this experience directly myself. And I also love this saying by Hafiz. He says, allow the dark times to season you. So again, there's this, when we're working with this wave, it's recognizing oftentimes it's our judgment of the wave, or our judgment of the thing that we are, the particle that we're experiencing, that gets us in trouble, instead of really just tuning into what we are aware of and how is our mind and the gates that we have defined there, or if it's completely undefined, how that is interpreting what information is coming from these centers down here, and especially the 50 and the 6. Now, as I said in the beginning of this video, I'm talking about this at a high level, not going into, do you have this defined, do you have this undefined, blah, 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 because every single one of us is so unique and so different. And in my therapeutic coaching sessions that I do with people, is really looking at their design and helping people to understand, how is your spleen working, how is your emotion center working, and how is your ajna working and interpreting this information, and also relative to everything else that you have going on in your chart as a unique person, as a unique energetic filter for what you're both experiencing in the world and transmitting in the world. So if you would like to understand more deeply how all of this is operating in your design, I highly recommend reach out to me. Let's have a conversation. There is a link in the notes of this, or if you're getting this in my newsletter, schedule a time to chat, and we can discover whether or not doing a little deeper dive into your design and understanding how your intelligence and how anxiety is being experienced and created through the mechanics of your design, and how to work with that to transform it and transmute it into wisdom. I hope that this has been helpful. This, for me, studying design for about 10 years now, just looking at the mechanics of the awareness centers alone and understanding a little bit about the roots of anxiety has really helped me personally so much, and also helped me working with my kids, my clients, and students. And I hope that it has been of service to you as well. Thank you so much for listening. And I hope to connect with you sometime soon. Take care.